episode of Inside Out, exploring the roads to redemption. I'm your co-host. Thomas, you haven't fired me just yet, so I'm happy
Nah,
about
you're
it.
still the host. You
I'm
got
still,
that.
still
You
co-host.
still got the co-host. You got the intro. You're doing your job.
Thank you so very much, dear brother. As mentioned earlier, I'm your co-host, Dr. Lawrence, and I'm the proud executive director and founder of A Bridge to Light, where we focus on not only enabling underserved communities to overcome obstacles that have traditionally hindered their progress, but yet to disrupt the school of prison pipeline and further enable the reentry of formerly incarcerated persons. It is my honor and pleasure to be joined with one of the smartest guys in the universe, our
Ah,
dear brother. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Our dear brother, our dear friend, Mr. Thomas Cotton.
man, brother, I appreciate that. My name's Thomas Cotton. I'm the founder and CEO of Redemption and Advancement Alliance, where our mission is to disrupt the cycles of incarceration by helping the most important part of the process, the person to overcome a lot of their barriers that they face and create a blueprint for life. I'm grateful to be here. I want to make sure that everybody likes, shares, subscribes, because this show we talk about some great things, and it's just going to get greater later. So as we continue to move forward, make sure you like, share, subscribe, so you get those notifications when we come on, when we're live. Make sure if you haven't seen all our shows, go back and hit those replays. Leave comments. We're looking forward to answering your comments and even having you on the show, possibly because of something you said that sparked a great conversation. So thanks for joining us today.
Excellent. And here at Inside Out, we explore the roles of redemption. Those roles of redemption have potential obstacles for the justice impacted person, not just the justice involved, the person actually it affected, but the community, the family in which they re-enter to. So we like to illuminate those issues. We like to illuminate those issues here on this show. And Thomas and I have a very unique history and background. We first met at Morehouse School of Medicine's very unique program called the Magic Program. And the Magic Program, Magic is actually an acronym, MAJIC, which stands for the Masters in Administration Justice Involved Care. And tonight's show is going to be a very special show, like all shows, but this one is more special because I had the opportunity, Thomas, and you and I spoke about this a little while ago. I had the distinct opportunity of being the keynote speaker at the North Texas Veterans Association Mental Health Summit. And it was very, very illuminating. It was very, very just a very, very honor to be there, to be their keynote speaker. And their theme was finding joy in life's transitions. Finding joy in life's transitions. And as the keynote speaker, I kind of added a little bit more to it. I said, finding joy in life's transitions, but my journey, my personal journey from combat to compassion.
Hmm.
And I spoke to just my service in the military for 26 years, my battle with cancer, and my attending Morehouse School of Medicine. But one thing that was illuminated, one thing that came to me while creating this presentation was the similarities between uh, formerly incarcerated persons and returning veterans, and
Yeah.
both of them returning into society. In several areas was spoken to or illuminated as far as homelessness, mental health issues, substance abuse issues, family isolation issues, and structural issues. In tonight's show, and possibly shows after this one, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into those structural, individual, community issues that not only does the veteran, me, experienced, but formerly incarcerated persons experience when reentering society.
Yeah. So we understand that people who go into the military versus people going to the prison, they have vastly different purposes and functions. We know that the military and prisons are for two different reasons. We understand that. But when we think about the structural and psychological similarities, there are a lot of notable comparisons that we can have. And the systems and the hierarchies, the loss of personal freedoms, there's so many similarities. But what we're dealing with also is the human element. And when we start thinking about the human element of the people that we are describing here, we have to understand that within every structure and every system, there can be outcomes that aren't the favorable to the people who are involved with them. And a lot of times in my history, I'm the one with the incarcerated history, been incarcerated, different other things. But in that history, I often wonder what would have been the difference between if I would have went to the military or if I would have went through the same pathway that I took. Understanding that I had an opportunity in 1990, August 17th, 1990. I had an opportunity to go to the military. Life happens. And so I didn't go on the date that I had already set up to go. But there were other things in a chain of events that took place in my life, and I went down a different pathway.
Yes, sir.
So we'll talk a little bit about these pathways in a little bit. But before we jump into this, Dr. Henry, share a little bit again. I know we have a show that they can go back and look at and hear both of our stories, the full parts of it. But let's catch up our viewers, just in case they don't know who you are, a little bit about your history of being in the military and how you got there.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much, Brother Cotton. Yes, I served 26 years and 1 month in the military. 20 of those years was as a Green Beret, Special Forces Green Beret, where our motto was "The oppressor liber," to liberate the oppressed. And in those 20 years as a Green Beret, I did just that. Along with some great, dedicated, highly trained soldiers, other Green Berets. We, deployed to Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Africa, South and Central America, to further facilitate the liberation of oppressed people. But there's a story under that story that we're going to speak to later on. When you speak to the comparison to formerly incarcerated persons and returning veterans into society. But with that, soon after my retirement, I was diagnosed with stage 3C colon cancer, which was diagnosed that just based on all my deployments to these unique environments, environmentally, this spoke to my diagnosis. But what, Thomas, I want to speak to another piece that although, you may have served in a certain way and I've served in a certain manner. Let me just let everybody know that life is a game of seconds, of milliseconds. It's not of days. And let me just tell you about a quick story that I haven't shared with many about maybe 1987, 1988, when my friends and I, young college, high school young men, having a good time on a Friday night, listening to 98.7 or WBLS 107.5 in New York, New Jersey, listening to the Rap Attack. And we were doing things that we should have been doing to a point where we couldn't even see out the window. And we were driving. And we were driving, and all of a sudden, the lights went on behind us. The lights went on behind us. They were blue lights. There was no blue light special. We were about to get the blue light special. So, yeah, exactly. And during that period of time, during that administration, it was not very kind to Black and brown young men that were doing certain things. So we got pulled over. The car was checked out. The car was checked out very, very aggressively. But I remember distinctively that a police officer told me, if I go in your pocket and find anything that's pointy, I'm going to beat your ass. And he was serious. And he made me sit on the curb, and all of us sit on the curb while the cars were driving by, looking at us, pointing, yelling our names and this and that. And by God's grace and mercy, seconds, we were praying that, Nothing was found in the car, which it wasn't anything in the car, but nothing mysteriously wound up in the car,
Right.
which changed my life forever. So when you look at the doctor or you look at the colonel, don't think his life has been so sweet, because life for me ain't been no crystal stair like most of us. So that was an event that could have changed my life forever, and possibly I probably wouldn't be sitting in front of the screen in front of you today. That's what leads me to this work with respect to Bridge to Light, to facilitate the disruption of school and prison pipeline and further enable the entry of formerly incarcerated persons, because there are environments that are against them from the door. So I could get further into that, but I don't want to steal too much thunder tonight because we got much to talk about, Brother Cotton, and we ain't even
Yeah.
began to talk about the subject. But with,
Yeah. That's all good.
yeah, with
I
that,
think your story matters.
your story, man. Your
Yeah.
story, eclipses my story, man.
Nah, I think, one of the things I really want to emphasize here is that, we're not trying to bring people who serve in our military into a space where it looks like we're comparing them to people who are incarcerated. What
No,
we're
sir.
talking about is systems and structures here. We're talking about people that have experiences. There are a lot of people who have experiences, like Dr. Lawrence just said right now. He had an experience where it could have went totally a different way. And there's many people in the military who make decisions every single day based upon their life circumstances. Doesn't mean they're any different than anybody else. They just chose to make the military their pathway, and thank God it was there for them. But there's a lot of systems and structures we'll talk about and similarities that we'll talk about. So don't look at this as saying that the people that are that serve in the military are bad. What we're talking about is we're talking about the personal experiences that people have while they're in there. We definitely know that the military is honorable space for our country, and we want to emphasize that. I'm married to a veteran, a retired veteran, and so it's not something that we're looking at. But we want everybody to really see beyond what you feel right now and begin to dig deeper. My story is one where it could have went a number of different ways. It's also, if I wasn't involved with some of the things I was involved with, maybe I would have made better decisions. Maybe if I didn't have certain things that happened to me, I might have made different decisions, but I didn't. I made the decisions that led me to being arrested the first time for armed robbery, and spending time in prison for that. And then second time for drug trafficking. It was conspiracy to distribute cocaine base, but that's a high term for drug trafficking. And so trafficking drugs from California to Nebraska, could have spent the rest of my natural life in prison. I literally at the age of 22, I was facing the rest of my natural life in prison. If I would have went to trial and not took a deal, I would still be in prison right now. I'm 52 years old. That was 30 years ago. And so when we start thinking about the idea of people and the decisions they make, there's a lot of trauma that we experience in life. There's a lot of decisions we make that can disrupt the way we want to move in life. But we have to also realize there's redemption,
Yeah,
and there's redemptive qualities in that. But on the way to redemption, there's a lot of challenges and things that we have to experience. And
right,
so, what we're going to talk about today are a lot of the challenges that Dr. Henry and myself both experience, and the similarities that we find in military and prison. And again, there's so many different ways we can go about this. So this is our first part of many parts, hopefully, to help you understand what the systems and structures that we're talking about, what they're like, how that impacts us, and even in the transitions of being when we leave these facilities, and the different challenges that not only uh, people in our situation face, but the opposition that's out there against them. And so
right.
we'll talk a lot about these different things. So again, like, subscribe, share,
That's
make
right.
sure you get the notifications for what we're about to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. Very, very helpful. Just to frame this evening's discussion. And Thomas, we can't get away from violence. We can't get away from violence, and that definition of violence in which we spoke to in previous discussions. And the main part that I want to talk about, yes, we talk about physical harm and psychological harm and even death. But the big piece that I want us to focus on, that I tell many groups that I speak to, is the deprivation and maldevelopment piece.
Mm.
You know, and it be and communities usually have an identity or something that distinguishes the east side from the west side. You know, it might be a street. It may be, these 10 blocks is the east side, whatever the case may be. But there's a distinction. And when looking at the deprivation and the maldevelopment piece, and just the reentry of formerly incarcerated and or returning veterans, there's a big piece that we can speak to. And tonight we're going to talk about, from big to small, talk about the structures. Talk about the structures as far as formal structures. Formal structures, you have rank structures in both the military and in prisons. But then you have the informal leadership, about, within prisons, and I'm sure you can, or jails, you could possibly speak to that. And I can speak to informal leaderships as far as, a certain group that kind of influence the senior leadership to do certain things. And so that, in the structure there is a very coercive structure for various reasons, for good and bad reasons. There's a degree of it's not a transformative environment, it's a transactional environment. You do this, you get that. You do that, you get this. In the military, and I believe in prisons. And also, it's a disciplined, it's a very disciplined, well, they inspire to facilitate discipline. And the reason why structure in a discipline piece is, you put an asterisk by it, because upon reentry, the formerly incarcerated person and or the veteran does not have that structure or that discipline to rely on now.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, sir?
Well, you think both environments, as you mentioned, have a level of command within it. There's rules, there's structure, there's daily routines, there's things you don't even have to think about. You just do. It is what it is. And when we start thinking about the discipline in the military, it's for order. It's necessary. In prison, it's meant to try to maintain safety or control. And so when we talk about the actual prison structure or military structure, we're not talking about the hierarchies and the control when it comes to inmates or the people that are around you that you have to live with. We're just talking about the general structure and hierarchy. And so when we think about the discipline that it's meant to maintain, it makes things easy. You take 18-year-old person, or you take a person who's never had discipline or structure in their life, and you wrap them into this structure. There's a sense of security in that. There's a sense of order. There's a sense of understanding that can take place where I don't even have to think about it. I just know I roll out of bed at this time. I go do my job at this time. I'm going to eat at all these different times. And somehow I'm going to stand at this gate and it's going to open for me at this time. When it comes to military, you have to go to your job. And I was talking with somebody just Friday night. So that was about 2 days ago. And I'm sorry, you guys don't know what day this is, but I'm letting you know. But I was talking to somebody 2 nights ago, and who's in the Air Force, and they were saying that they worked a 16-hour shift. And my son asked him, he said, "Did you have a choice? Could you have left?" He's like, "No. When they say we're working these 16 hours, I have to work these 16 hours. And when it's done, then I can leave." And my son was like, "Wow, that just doesn't seem right." And I started thinking at that moment about this topic, is that there are so many similarities to that. There's so many similarities that if they say this is not a suggestion, this is law, this is rule. So when we talk about strict hierarchies and structure, we're talking about law and rule. If they say, you do. And that's one of the things that I think about when it comes to hierarchies and structures,
Or it's met with a consequence.
or a consequence.
Or
Yeah,
it's
you
met
can
with
say
a
no.
consequence, or it's met with a consequence either from the formal leadership or the
Mhm.
informal leadership.
Yep.
If and that reminds me, we're not going to jump off into this tonight, but what's called the prisoner's dilemma. There's a game theory called the prisoner's dilemma, and I encourage those of you watching, maybe Google it, and it's a comply and defect, 2x2 box. If the inmate or the justice impacted person, if they comply to the rules of the institution, then they're defecting from the culture of the informal structure. But if they comply with the informal structure, then they're defecting from the formal structure. And it's a very interesting, study to look at. And I encourage you, it's not very hard. It just shows you, and it's applicable to all kinds of situations, called the prisoner's dilemma. But I tell you, was also, so we talk about being on the inside, but also what was unique, Thomas, I tell you, was the preparation to return to society. We often spoke about preparation should start at initial booking, and the or as early as possible.
As
What's
early as possible.
as early as possible for those who are incarcerated to reenter society, to give them an opportunity to integrate in a more seamless manner. I think that's logical. But there's a
Yeah.
one, in most situations, because of fiscal reasons, because of expertise, it's a very limited type of approach in some situations, as far as this is a one-stop shop, like Operation Greenlight, as we spoke about before. Well, in the military, they don't know when you're getting out. You could do 26 days, 26 months, 26 years. But they attempt to facilitate your re-engagement into society, maybe a year out, maybe 2 years out. So you figure I did 26 years of doing this one thing, back and forth. Now all of a sudden I'm about to go into that world that don't have the structure, that don't have this, that don't have the routines, and I got to operate in this space. And some of us that haven't done 26 years, maybe did 8 or 6 years, got to operate in this space. And that's very, very traumatizing. There's a lot of anxiety in that. There's a lot of fear and apprehension. So, I mean, that is similar to something that one that's just as impacted or just as involved may experience when they're about to re-enter society after 20 plus years, after 8 years, after 10 years. Can we further build on that, brother?
So one of the things that I talk about when it comes to reentry, and the reason why I do what I do, and focus on people and not just getting a job, not just helping to get housing, I focus on the person. And the reason why is because you have a person who lived a certain lifestyle, and that lifestyle wasn't conducive to freedom. Let's just say that. It was illegal, and they're wrapped in this illegal lifestyle, and they never really learned how to live any other way. And then they get arrested, and then once they're arrested, they're put into a system. And this
Yes.
system, now what we're talking about, structures, hierarchy, you lost your freedom, everything's standardized, you have this schedule, you have restricted movements, you have rules and everything else. And so you're in this system. Now you're given another barrier, which is a felony. And now that you have this felony, you have to serve this time for that felony, however much time it is. It can be 6 months, it could be 6 weeks, it could be 6 years, it could be whatever it is. But once you're released from here, you're put back into society, expected to change, expected to live different, and expected to understand how to live right now. That to me is one of the similarities with the military. You have a young person who goes into the military. They're given all these rules and standardizations, and they're they understand how to function in this world right here. But upon release, they have to now learn how to live a life that doesn't have these systems and structures anymore, and one that they've never lived in before successfully. And now they have to understand how to transition out and live successfully in order to maintain what they know in their sanity and their certain lifestyle. That's why we have so many people coming out of prison that are homeless. That's why we have so many people coming out of military that are homeless. And we can keep going back and forth and look at we'll talk about these things coming up in a later show, but we can talk about how there's so many similarities because of this reason, where people really don't know how to transition back into a world they never lived before.
Yeah, I like how you ended the transition piece. Again, in my experience, most recently with the North Texas Veteran Association Mental Health Summit, and its theme was finding joy in life's transitions. And as you suggested, you get this young man and or young woman from X city, town, country, whatever the case may be, and you train them how to be a weapon of war. You train them how to break things and kill people. And oh, by the way, in your second job, you're an admin clerk, or you're a cook, or you're this, but your basic training is how to break things and kill people. From about 300 meters away with your weapon, and or with other various means, calling for fire and this and that. But basically, that's your job. And you've done that, and you've experienced the ugly thing called war, where you had to put that training to actual application, and you've tasted war. You've tasted death up close, internally, a friend, and or externally, the person who's trying to kill you. You killed them. And you carry that with you. And now it's time to reintegrate into society. This war machine, this component within the war system, war machine, this spark plug. You're going to take that spark plug and put it into a Volkswagen after they've been running in a Porsche. And it's been running. Now all of a sudden, you're going to put that in a Ford Tempo. No, man. You're going to have a problem.
And we can talk about exactly that same war machine.
Thank you for joining us this evening. And stand by for our next episode, where we go further into the similarities between returning veterans and formerly incarcerated persons into society. Thank you.